Breaking a bad habit can be challenging, but it is possible if you know how. Here are the 5 keys to creating a new habit. I organize these 5 keys into an acronym called CLEAR. Let's get into it. Key number 1, commitment. The what and the why. Folks, all change starts with a decision to change. Deciding that you don't want the bad habit any longer is a good start, but also decide that the more skillful habit must happen. Decide with a level of certainty that comes with knowing that you must change. That brings us to key number 2, location, otherwise known as the trigger response when. There are times when the bad habit is prompted to be your natural response. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, reminds us that habits are the building blocks in life, and they start with a trigger and end with our response. If you're struggling with a bad habit, that means you have a response to a trigger that you don't like. Location means that you identify the triggers that precede the bad habit. For example, I wanted to create an eating and fasting window. But here I was relaxing at night and I wanted to munch. The trigger was sitting down to watch TV or surf the internet, and that got the ball rolling to munch even when I wasn't hungry. When it comes to identifying the trigger, identify what you are thinking or experiencing when you start to notice momentum towards the bad habit. Bring the trigger and response into awareness. Get smart about your conditioning. By the way, you can interrupt the trigger and response cycle when you're aware that you're in one. Shift your attention, change your routine, do anything that interrupts this habit or this trigger that comes with the response. Now, this alone won't break the habit, but it's one of the many things you can do to send strong signals to rewire your brain. Speaking of which, key number 3, expect to change. Do you believe that you can change? If not, you'll swim upstream when trying to change if you believe that you can or that your approach to change will work. If you lack a belief or expectation that you can change, focus on times when you did make change and it worked out well, brought you pleasure. Our narrative about change shows our level of expectation. The bad habit isn't permanent, pervasive, or personally defining. It is what it is. And what it is a temporary learned response that can be unlearned by replacing it with something better. Speaking of replacing something better, key number 4 is ability. Feed the new through physical and mental rehearsal. Practice the new as you associate it with the trigger. Practice physically and mentally as both share a common neural network, because what fires together wires together in the brain. For example, the person who wants to learn to close the eating window after 5 p.m., yet they sit down and notice the desire to munch arises, get off the couch and do something relaxing, such as yoga or envisioning how good it feels to give your digestive system a rest. You can reprogram the trigger. Speaking of reprogramming, key number 5, reinforce. Reinforcement gets the ball in the end zone. All the things we've talked about up to this point won't make change stick unless you increase your ability to reinforce the change. Back to James Clear in his book Atomic Habits, he shares 4 laws of behavior change, and it's all about how we reinforce the change. Here are the 4. He said, make it obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. He's reminding us that when we associate pleasure with the new, make it easy by having others encouraging us, or creating an environment where it's the most logical choice, change happens. Think of reinforcement on 3 levels: individual, social, and environmental. At the individual level, making new choices through willpower rewires your brain because you're behaving differently. That works. Individual reinforcement works also when we mentally rehearse the new behavior as we think about the trigger. Also, back to the narrative, notice your narrative about yourself and the change. Is the change what those healthy people do, but you're not really one of them? Change your narrative. Because when you change your narrative, you change your life. Change gets easier when we aim for 1% improvement each day. And we look at each opportunity to learn, lovingly work with ourselves to learn new patterns. Folks, don't go drill sergeant on yourself and expect change to stick, because you'll end up creating more resistance. Be loving. Like a good coach, be loving yet candid about what's going on. Speaking of social reinforcement, that's also key. You really need those around you to, if it's possible, model the new, remind you, and hold you to account. If they're engaging in bad behavior, it makes change all the more difficult. So talk to them and see if you can negotiate the kind of social reinforcement that you'll need. And when it comes to environmental reinforcement, you just want to make the change easier to do. For example, if you're running every morning or want to run every morning, set out your clothes the night before and envision yourself just getting out on the trail. I worked with some utility crews at an electric utility to change their safety habits. Now, they were very motivated and committed, but really had spotty safety habits until we put the personal protective equipment on their trucks and incented crew members to speak up when it was time to use it. In summary, CLEAR represents the keys to change that sticks. Don't underwhelm a challenge that requires all 5 elements. Aim for incremental change each day as you patiently coach yourself to embrace new behaviors that will make your life much better. Thanks for joining us today. Like and subscribe to the Change Capability Institute so we can keep cranking out content like this for you and others.